Good morning, welcome to Good Morning Sri Lanka on MTV Sports. Today is Friday and thank God it's Friday. It's the 23rd of November 2012 and I hope your week has turned out to be great. For those of you who had a rough week, don't worry, the weekend's just around the corner. I hope you're enjoying today as well. Now, just before we head on to the rest of our show, which also has been the end of something we've been focusing on right throughout the last 2 weeks. It's about women empowerment and eradicating gender-based violence. Let's take a look at some of the stories that's been happening over the past week. Now, police have found ancient swords and somehow tried to be a bit more dramatic, has probably stolen these swords from the National Museum, and fresh investigation has been initiated to find out whether these ancient swords at Kelaniya, which was found over the week, was stolen from the National Museum, and the CID are currently investigating into it. And also the recent floods and the death toll have risen to 2. At least 2 people were killed in the recent floods that occurred in the Matara district. Bad news definitely. And accordingly, the first death was reported from Kahawatha. A person was buried alive after a mound of soil fell onto his house. And also in Nonagama, Ambalanthota, where one person was killed due to another collapse of soil. Then, this is something that's really out of anyone's control, but natural disasters all around the world. I mean, who knows, this might be a build-up to the Mayan prophecy of the 2012 world end, but let's hope it is not. So that's some of the stories that's been happening. Taking a look at some of the international stories. Now, the US Deputy Assistant Secretary of the State for South and Central Asian Affairs has made an interesting comment, and she goes on to say that the Sri Lankan budget is something that's encouraging, while stating that Sri Lanka had made significant progress implementing the LLRC report through the National Action Plan. The US said over the week that the budget 2013 that was presented recently was very encouraging, as each government department was being given budget allocations to implement the National Action Plan. And also over the past week we had another significant news in the international arena. The sole gunman to survive the attacks, the terrorist attacks that happened in Mumbai way back in 2008 was executed. Mohammad Kazab was executed in an Indian prison, and he was the sole gunman to have survived the attacks in 2008, something that a lot of Indians have, it's something that they cannot just forget. It's a very recent terrorist attack, and India wasn't really expecting this, but then this has been ended. So moving on to some sports news as well, as we were mentioning right throughout the week, the school's cricket season is on the way. Peters with outright victory. DSN Nalanda record first innings win. Now, Giant Lianage smashed a quick fire 62 of 35 balls and to give St. Peter's a victory over the Mazenod College in Kadana. And also in other news of cricket, DS has managed to record a victory. Binra Fernando was the all-rounder for the match between DS College and Royal College Colombo, where DSN College managed to come on top there as well. So we'll be bringing more stories of that as well. But right about now, let's head on to a quick break. But when we are back, we'll head on to the highlight of the show, where we'll be talking a bit about women empowerment and the campaign that is just about to kick off in the weekend. And we'll be having a chat with Bimali. Stay tuned to Good Morning Sri Lanka. Back to Good Morning Sri Lanka. Now, this is a topic that we've been talking about for the past 2 weeks, but we've come to the end of this because the campaign is actually about to start off. So let me welcome to the studio and wish a very good morning to Bimali. Good morning, Bimali.
Hello, Mevan. Hi.
Yes, and it's nice to have you on the show finally, because I believe you are one of the key people organizing the campaign, which kicks off on Sunday, the 16 days of activism. Shall we get right to it and just mentioning a brief introduction about the campaign?
Well, Mevan, the 16 Days of Activism is a global campaign, and it began in 1991 by the Center for Global Leadership, and it connects the 25th of November, which is the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. That was designated by the UN in 1999, and it goes on till 10th December, which is the Human Rights Day, when the Declaration of Human Rights was put in 1948. So that is a 16 days of activism which connects women's that violence against women is a human rights violation.
Definitely. And why the 25th of November? I think there's an interesting story behind that as well.
Yeah, that was actually in 1960 there was a violent assassination of the Mirabal sisters, and this led to a lot of discussion, debate that that violence against women cannot be accepted, that it cannot go on, that we as the men need to act on this issue. And this led to various movements beginning to campaign, and that led to the day being designated as a day to end violence against women. And that led to in 1991 also as the 16 days the international day, day dedicated for the end of violence against women by the Center for Global Leadership, which connected the 16 days to the 10th of December. And the UN designated that in 1999, as I was saying.
And also within these 16 days, these days also include a lot of other specific dates that have been declared by the United Nations for specific causes as well. If you'd just like to mention a bit about that as well.
Yeah, well, 29th November is the Human Rights Defenders Day. Then 30th is the South Asian Day to End Violence Against Women. 1st of December is the International Day for AIDS and HIV/AIDS. So then say the 3rd of December is the International Day for Disability, and 6th is the White Ribbon Campaign, where there was there's a Montreal massacre which happened where women were actually murdered, and that caused men to stand up and say we as men should speak out against violence against women. So it's 16 days which connects 25th of November to 10th December. So during that time there are many movements and networks and in organizations, government, non-government, that link together, that are working in the area of ending gender-based violence, that join together to launch various campaigns, meaning to put out phone numbers, service provider numbers, and to campaign an end to violence against women.
And also I understand that this is a global campaign which Sri Lanka is actually being a part of. And in Sri Lanka we have a special theme which is Rise Up and Speak Up Against Violence, if I'm not mistaken. So if you just like to mention the key features that will be happening in various different places, and what the real objective of this entire campaign is.
Well, actually this is the forum has had several campaigns, and the Forum Against Gender-Based Violence is chaired by United Nations Population Fund, and it has several organizations, local, non-governmental, which are all involved in issues of gender-based violence right through the year. So they will be organizing various programs together with the forum and individually, and one of the main things is to disseminate information for victim survivors of violence, of domestic violence, of rape, incest, that there are services, there are shelters, there are services to access for counseling, legal aid, and for victims to come forward to break their silence and to say enough, the violence has to end in your life, to break out of your violence, so that you could be able to live a life full of dignity with a violence-free life. So that's what we are trying to work towards, and to spread the word of this and to report to police the bureau numbers. So the entire campaign is on dissemination of various information at district level and in Colombo.
And also talking about now, as you mentioned earlier, this campaign has been happening for a while. If you'd just like to mention some of the successes that you've seen and the impact that you think that you have made on the society as a whole in spreading awareness about this issue.
Well, actually we have noticed that I think people, it's very difficult to speak when you have undergone violence in your life, some form of violence, abuse, child abuse, domestic violence, because it's a private matter and people don't really want to speak about it. So initially, when we just had certain exhibitions, and then we realized we need to tell people what to do, because one thing was people didn't know what to do when you are in a violent situation of violence. And the most important thing is to speak to someone and to be able to overcome your violence either through access the legal system or speaking to a counselor, so that you would be speaking to both partners or the person who's abusing and rescue that person if that needs to be done. And we have noticed that we have Women in Need helpline is the helpline that we put out mainly in our campaigns, because they provide service, they provide victims with legal aid and counseling, and their number is 011-471-8585. It's a 24-hour helpline, and anyone can call if you need any help. If you are undergoing any violence in your life, in domestic violence or rape. So I would say the impact is that we have been able to take this message that violence in your life should not be tolerated, that it has to end, and there are ways to live a life of respect, of dignity, where you'll be respected as a woman. And also to men, that many men are coming forward to speak against violence, because it is something that as a group, as a society, we need to say that it's wrong.
Exactly. And also this campaign also focuses a lot about bringing together different people from different backgrounds and different involvements in society as well. So the main event on the 25th, which is the launch of this campaign, is it mainly focusing on bringing together people and actually making them aware and educating them on this issue, or are there other features added to it as well?
Well, we are having an event on Galface Green, and we invite the public to join us on that day. It begins at 3 o'clock. There is a walk led by Women in Need, which also begins at 3 o'clock from Perahera Mawatha, and it will come to Galface. And there will be various groups coming from different districts who will be performing song and dance against violence against women. There will be messages against violence against women, and it's actually coming together of bringing people and to launch this campaign of 1 billion rising, which is also a global campaign, and it's a coming together of various groups from different walks of life, different sectors, non-governmental, governmental, private sector coming together, and so it's bringing these groups together, because that 1 billion rising campaign is a call from V-Day. So it's being launched in Sri Lanka on the 25th of November. And one of the other issues that as a forum we are doing is we are also popularizing the service provider numbers through various banners that will be displayed at various points in the police stations, in hospitals, in the government offices. So that will be done. And also we'll be having a policy discussion on the National Human Rights Action Plan.
Exactly, that's interesting. That's something that is new this year, if I'm not mistaken, the introduction of a policy. Now, if you'd just like to talk a bit about that, we've had different people expressing their views on the show as well about the legal framework that's in place and the implementation and the issues faced when implementing this. If you'd just like to specifically just talk about this policy that you're going to put forward.
No, we are not going to put forward a policy. This is the policy of the government of Sri Lanka. It's a National Action Plan for the Protection and Promotion of Human Rights, which was put forward by Sri Lanka. So there are different stakeholders, and there's a section on women's rights, and a separate, and under that a separate section on violence against women that the state has committed to, on like strengthening the police desks, rebuilding mechanisms, the language, strengthening implementing the Plan of Action for the Domestic Violence Act implementation. So there are various identified activities, issues in the National Action Plan for the Protection and Promotion of Human Rights. What the forum is doing is bringing for certain stakeholders together who are part of the implementation and discussing how to take where the gaps are and what needs to be done, and having a discussion, and also disseminating the policy so that we as Sri Lankans know that this policy is there, and that we are all responsible to make sure that this is implemented for the welfare of all people in Sri Lanka.
Definitely, implementation is a big part of it, because there's no point having everything in theory if it doesn't happen in practice. Now we're going to move on with our discussion and talk about some of the interesting topics, especially about the key stakeholders and the organizations that are involved in this. But right about now, let's head on to a short break. We'll be back on Good Morning Sri Lanka.